Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Clear here with a knife video for you. This is a knife that a couple of you saw and commented on before and that I've been waiting to do a video about. This is the CRKT Obake. You can see the name there and that it's designed by Lucas Burnley. There's the blade. It's got a pretty cool finish on it. There's the handle with that sort of Japanese inspired wrap. Here's the other side, CRKT, similar stuff going on. This knife is a production version of the Lucas Burnley Quakin, which is a popular custom knife that he makes. That Quakin custom is also the inspiration for the Boker Quakin that's very popular right now. So this knife shares some similar thought processes to that knife. And so, as you know, CRKT takes those custom knives and they just make them with lower end materials and different processes so that they can put it out at a more reasonable price point. So I actually really appreciate that about CRKT, and I mentioned that before in the video why I like them. All right, size and weight on this is actually really good. The whole thing, lanyard and sheath and knife, come in at 3.1 ounces. The knife all by itself comes in at 2.3 ounces. The length on this is 8 1/4 inches, 7.5 inches overall for the blade. 3.5 inch blade is what you're dealing with. So that's the size and weight. This knife is designed, at least in Burnley's own words in the video that CRKT put out describing this knife, as an EDC knife. And so I think the size and weight is perfectly legitimate to facilitate that. Just for comparison, here's the Paramilitary 2. And if I take this knife out of the sheath, you can see how those compare. Obviously, the Obake is considerably smaller, but the length is not too dissimilar. And especially if you look at just cutting length itself. Obviously, many people have pointed out the handle on the Paramilitary, although extremely ergonomic, and it is maybe a little longer than what you'd expect for the amount of blade you're getting. This knife, not so much. You've got 4-inch handle and 3.5 inch blade, which seems pretty standard, right? You do see that fairly frequently in 7.5 inch knives. Now, the blade itself, actually, before I get to the blade, let me demonstrate how this knife is intended to be carried. The lanyard is kind of a key component, and I'm going to suggest that this process could actually work with any knife that has a sheath that's about this size. It could probably work for a knife that's slightly bigger, slightly smaller. All you'd have to do is take the lanyard and attach it to the end of the sheath like that, and then that being at the tip of the sheath is kind of critical. So then you take this, I'm going to go through the process a little bit, tie this around your belt loop. You could tie it around your belt, but I've just gotten used to using my belt loop. So slide that through. There you go. So now it's attached, right? You've got the sheath attached to your pants. Now you can carry the knife in a number of different ways. You carry it in your pocket. I have carried it this way. You can carry it in sort of an appendix carry position, and I have carried it this way. You can carry it in the small of your back. A little harder to get in there, but certainly possible. There we go. So you can carry it in the small of your back. All of these positions are pretty comfortable and pretty easily done. And then when you extract the knife, you're going to grab it, and I'll move the camera here. So notice now I'm at the end of the lanyard, but you keep pulling, and that extracts the knife from the sheath. That way, you're also in a position to put the knife back in without poking the point of a knife around, near your body or your clothing, so you're not going to wreck anything. Let me take this off very quickly, and we can carry on. That little demonstration is kind of critical to the video because I want to be able to make some comments about whether this does what it sets out to do, which is become a practical, carryable EDC knife. And my experience, and I've been carrying this for a while now, is that it actually works pretty well. It's quite comfortable, very lightweight, and not at all intrusive in virtually any carry position. The other thing that, because of the variation that you can use in carrying this knife, it could also be a backup knife. So you could put it in your waistband as an appendix carry, and then you could drop your main EDC that day into your pocket the way you normally would. So it kind of gives you a lot of options for carry, and I really, really appreciate that. That's pretty handy. Now, in addition to this whole thing, I think I mentioned, but if I didn't, I'll just mention it again, that there is a bolt-on belt clip that you can use with this, or belt loop that you can use with this. The blade itself, let's get into that part of it, is HCR 14 MOV steel. I guess everything, the whole knife is that. It's a hollow grind, and the blade shape is considered like a standard blade shape or straight back, depending on who you talk to and what website you look on. But very, very, just perfectly straight spine, and the belly of the knife goes up to meet it. Other knife names come from variations on this shape. Okay, so if it's a clip point, it means someone's clipped the end of this point off. If it's a drop point, it means the back of the knife drops to meet the cutting edge. So this is just a standard shape of a knife, and you can well imagine why that is the case. Obviously, you've got a fairly thin profile in this dimension, very acute point, not quite 1/8 of an inch here. It is a hollow ground knife, and there is not a whole lot of flat here. There's a little bit of straight, but it's mostly all belly, all the way from here to about here. So that blade shape is actually pretty functional. I've done a lot of cutting with it, and overall it works really well. Like other blades that are thin in the profile, it does have a fairly abrupt angle. It has to, because you've got to go from nothing up to almost 1/8 of an inch fairly quickly in about 1/2 an inch. So, and in fact it's less than 1/2 an inch, because there is a flat part of the blade here. So that means it's got a fairly abrupt grind angle, and that means it's going to interfere a little bit with materials. Now, I didn't notice it heavily. I wasn't constantly worrying about it. What I did notice, though, is if you're cutting something really fine, like phone book paper or receipt paper or something, which I like to do to test sharpness, the texture on here, the finish, will interfere a little bit with the material you're cutting. So let's get into that next. It is a coating. I guess I should comment on edge retention. I've already mentioned it did cut well. Everything I cut with it, from rope to fruit to vegetables to wood, cardboard, everything in between, it did cut everything well. I didn't have any specific complaints. I could get away with this cutting virtually everything. However, the coating does have a slight texture. So this you can see that there's a finish on here. It looks like acid etching. It's not. It's done with some kind of paint that they probably have sort of spun out in a certain way so that it would fly off and make this little pattern, which is nice. It looks really cool. However, it's a coating. So when they have this blade, they've first put like a gray or a black coating on it. Then they've put the other coating that looks like acid etching over that, and then they've painted the CRKT and the Obake little logos on here. So there's a number of layers, and with all those coatings, you know what that means. It's going to wear. Now, it doesn't seem to wear badly. I've put this knife through its paces. One of the cool things about a fixed blade is you don't have to have any hesitation. I mean, you can cut anything, you can jam it into anything you want, you can push on it as hard as you want. There's no pivot to break. It's beautiful. So I have really bared down and pushed this through all kinds of stuff, and the coating is holding up well, but eventually it will wear. There's no such thing as a coating of this kind that doesn't wear. Even DLC, which is actually the best because it chemically becomes a part of the steel, it's going to wear over time. There's no such thing as a coating that doesn't. That's one of the reasons I love the black wash finish on the zero tolerance knives, because that finish is going to hide that wear really, really well. Anyway, back to this knife. The odd time the texture of that coating would interfere with a cut. Only when you're cutting something really fine. I'd be cutting phone book paper and it would slip through super easy. But then on the next cut, the paper would bind on the coating. okay? You only notice it when you're cutting something really fine like that. Otherwise, it's not noticeable at all. But that's how the coating works. It does look really cool. I've got to give credit. CRKT did a great job of making a really cool looking blade. They just did it by, adding coatings. So that's fine. They were going for a look. They definitely achieved the look they were going for. Aesthetically, it's very pleasing. Just that any knife that's coated with anything is going to wear eventually. The handle is also a win as far as I'm concerned, because it is small, but I didn't notice that as a big issue. I just used the knife the way I felt natural and comfortable using it, and I didn't find myself saying, man, I wish this handle was bigger. Nothing like that. In fact, I love the way that they've done the wrapped paracord, and the way they've done this is it's wrapped, yes, but the paracord is first infused with like an epoxy or a glue or some kind of hardening agent, so that after it's wrapped and in place, it hardens, and it's very, very firm. It's not like if you just took some paracord and wrapped it around something at home. Not at all. It's extremely rigid, and it's a great combination of grippiness and comfort, because there's still just a little bit of give there, but all of that wrapping gives a lot of texture, so you can really get a hold of this knife and really, really grip it. The other nice thing is, because there are spaces in here, if your hand is sweaty at all or anything like that, there's some air space. It can still breathe, and so this is a real win. I would love to see other knives done in this same finish. This is a really, really nice way of finishing a handle. All right. Underneath there, you can see is a faux ray skin, and it is purely aesthetic. It looks good as far as I'm concerned, and I don't have any real ray skin knives. Normally that comes in pretty high-end options. Someday I'd like a Microtech SOCOM with ray skin, or maybe a DOC, but that's down the road. In the meantime, I'll have to satisfy myself with the fake ray skin that comes on this knife. And so the handle, I think, is a real win. The other thing about these sort of Japanese-inspired handle shapes is that any grip will work. Doesn't matter. Hold on to it any way you want to. You get the same size, the same shape, the same grippiness in any configuration. And that, I think, is kind of an advantage. It may be a real advantage for someone who is trained for knife fighting in some particular way. So the handle, I think, is very, very nice, very comfortable and effective. Overall, I think this is actually a really good everyday carry knife. It's small, it's unobtrusive, it's light, it's extremely tough. The reality is that if there's a pivot, that is, if it's a folding knife, it can fail. A fixed blade knife just doesn't have that weak point. It's just a hunk of steel, which is great. And so if you're in a situation where you think, man, I need a knife that I can really, really count on to never, ever, ever have an issue, whether it be an issue opening or closing, whatever, this is a pretty good option, I'm going to suggest. The other thing that I could see this knife being used for, in addition to an EDC knife, this could be a backup blade. Maybe you're law enforcement, maybe you're, a CIA agent, and you're bursting through windows in deepest, darkest parts of the world where you never know what's going to happen, and you need a knife that you can, hide somewhere on your person. This would fit the bill, I think. Because of the size and shape, because of the little lanyard, there's a lot of variation on how you can carry this, and that's really, really nice. I've found, maybe some of you have been familiar with this lanyard method of carry for a long time. This is kind of the first I've heard about it, and I'm actually really, really impressed. I could see doing this on a lot of different fixed blades. So my overall impressions are, yeah, it's a good EDC, totally acceptable. The only drawback is, as you guys know, I like a larger knife. So even the Para 2 is on the smaller end of my collection, and this is even smaller than that. So generally, I'm carrying something bigger than this. Now, it is pretty cool, so that kind of, that helps a little with the fact that it's kind of small. But generally, I like a knife just a little bit bigger, and to make this knife bigger would make, everything bigger. The whole advantage of a folding knife is that you end up with a reasonably sized knife, but now it's half the size, right? That's the advantage. With this, of course, you don't get that, and that limits how big you can go, right? There's a limit on how large you're going to make this knife without it being impractical as an EDC. But as it stands right now, I really, really like using this knife. I found it takes an edge, it holds an edge, it does everything I need to do with it, and it does it while looking pretty stinking cool, right? You got to say that's a cool looking blade. And you also get the sheath and this neat little skull bead and a really, really creative and different carry method, especially, maybe you just like being different. I think this knife is a little different than what we're used to seeing in the industry. So that's kind of fun as well. So overall, yeah, I think the Obake is a win. I will definitely continue to use it and enjoy it as I have been, leading up to this video. There you go. That's my take on the CRKT Obake. I hope you liked the video. I definitely liked the blade. I'll give you one more look at it before I go. Take a look at that cool finish. It is a really cool finish. There you go. Talk to you later, YouTube.